You pushed back once. That was enough. The meeting ended normally. Everyone smiled, nodded, moved on. But something behind the scenes shifted that afternoon. What you're feeling has a name. It's called narrative protection. And HR begins building a file the moment you contradict the official story. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to decode exactly how this file gets built, what triggers it, and why most professionals never see it coming. The first sign is invisible. Your manager starts CC HR on emails that used to be casual one-on-ones. But the real damage happens at the documentation stage, and that's where most professionals lose their position without knowing the file even exists. Here's what actually happens. The moment you challenge a leadership narrative, you stop being a contributor and start being a variable. Variables get tracked. Tracked employees get documented. Documented employees become manageable risks rather than valued professionals. You'll notice your manager becomes oddly formal in writing. Phrases like "as discussed" and "per our conversation" begin appearing where they never did before. This is not paranoia. This is the language of file building. Every sentence is structured to live inside a future folder. Picture this. Tuesday afternoon, you disagreed with the director's framing of a failed launch. By Thursday, your manager scheduled a check-in that was never on the calendar before. That check-in is the first entry. It's not about you. It's about creating a baseline reference point HR can cite later. What you thought was a routine conversation was actually a logged event. The system has begun. Here's the quiet part. HR doesn't build files to fire you immediately. They build files to neutralize your credibility before you become inconvenient. The goal isn't punishment. The goal is narrative control. Your version of events must never carry more weight than the official one. This is where the pattern reveals itself. You'll notice feedback shifting from skill-based to behavioral. Comments about your tone, your approach, your communication style. None of it measurable, all of it documentable. Behavioral feedback is the cornerstone of the quiet file because it cannot be disproven with data. It lives in interpretation. The deeper problem is this. Once behavioral language enters your record, every future achievement gets filtered through that frame. A high performer with a tone problem is treated differently than a high performer without one. The label travels faster than the work. If this sounds like your last quarter, you're not paranoid. You're recognizing the architecture professionals only see after it's too late. Watch what happens next. Your one-on-ones get rescheduled to 30 minutes instead of an hour, then to 15, then to "let's catch up on Slack." The reduction in face time is intentional. Less verbal communication means more written exchanges, and written exchanges are documentable. Every Slack message you send during this period is potentially a future exhibit. The medium itself becomes the trap. This is where it gets sharper. HR will introduce a neutral third party, often framed as support or coaching. That coach is not your ally. That coach is a witness. Their notes become part of the file you cannot see. Phrases like "we want to help you succeed here" usually mean a parallel record is being maintained somewhere outside your access. Here's a phrase to remember when this starts. Can you put that in writing for me? It forces the other side to commit to documentation too. Most professionals make the mistake of accepting verbal feedback gracefully. Verbal feedback is one-sided documentation. Written feedback creates symmetry. The next layer most professionals miss is the calibration meeting. This is where your file gets discussed without you present. In that room, your manager presents a version of you shaped by the documentation they've been building for weeks. You are not there to correct anything. Picture this. A conference room on a Wednesday afternoon. 6 leaders discussing 20 employees. Your name comes up for 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes, the file does the talking. Not your work, not your results. The narrative that was constructed after you challenged the bigger one. What looked like a performance discussion was actually a perception consolidation meeting. The decision about you was already drafted. This is the part nobody warns you about. The file isn't built to be read. It's built to be referenced. Referenced when you ask for a promotion. Referenced when a layoff list is being shaped. Referenced when severance is being calculated. The pattern accelerates from here. You'll notice fewer strategic projects, more maintenance work, less visibility with leadership. This is called scope compression. Your responsibilities quietly narrow until your role looks redundant on paper, which is exactly the point. And that changes everything. Because the file you never saw has now produced an outcome that looks organic to everyone else. If you've watched this happen to a coworker, drop a single word in the comments. Documented. It tells me you've seen the pattern up close. If you're recognizing yourself in this video, drop a number from 1 to 4 indicating which stage you're in. I read every comment on this channel. Subscribe before we go deeper, because the next sections cover what to watch for and how to recognize the file being opened in real time. Now let's go into the deeper layers most professionals never get to see. The quiet file has structural markers. The first is the unsolicited recap email. A meeting ends and suddenly your manager sends a written summary you didn't ask for. That recap exists because someone, somewhere, needs a paper trail of your alignment or misalignment with a conversation. The second marker is the introduction of expectations language. Expectations are softer than goals but harder than feedback. They're designed to be ambiguous enough to fail. When a manager says, "I just want to set clear expectations going forward," translate it as, a baseline is being established for future deviation claims. The third marker is the sudden appearance of formal one-on-one templates, bullet points, action items, timestamps. None of it was there last quarter. Here's a phrase that creates strategic friction. I want to make sure I understand. Could you clarify the specific metric? It forces specificity into vagueness. Vagueness is the file's best friend. Specificity is its enemy. The more you push for measurable criteria, the harder the file becomes to weaponize. Picture this: a performance discussion where your manager mentions collaboration concerns. You ask which specific instances. They cannot name 3. That moment of unnamed specificity is your leverage. Without examples, the feedback cannot survive scrutiny in a serious review. But here's what makes this worse. Most professionals don't ask. They accept the framing, nod, and inadvertently sign their own narrative. The strategic move is not aggression. The strategic move is documentation. You build your own quiet file in parallel with dates and outcomes. Save your wins. Save your written praise. Save every email that contradicts the emerging narrative. Build the symmetry HR didn't expect. Here's another phrase worth keeping. Thanks for the feedback. I'll think about it. Neutral. Non-committal. Buys time. Concedes nothing. The instinct to defend yourself in the moment is the instinct that fills the file fastest. Defensiveness becomes another data point. The deeper insight is this: the file is not really about you. It's about protecting the people whose narrative you threatened. Organizations don't document neutral employees. They document inconvenient ones. The file is a proxy for institutional discomfort. Here's a phrase for the moment a manager presses for an immediate response. I prefer to discuss this when we have more time. It stops the trap from closing. Pressure creates documentation. Calm creates space. The professional who refuses to be rushed is the professional who survives the longest. This is the strategic awareness layer most career advice never reaches. It's not about being a better employee. It's about being a less documentable one. Now let's talk about exit signals. The quiet file usually ends in one of 3 outcomes: a managed exit, a stalled career, or a quiet reassignment. The managed exit is the cleanest. A severance offer arrives months after the file began. You think it's sudden. It was scheduled. The stalled career is the most painful. You stay, but every promotion request hits invisible resistance. The file does its work in silence for years. The quiet reassignment is the most strategic. You're moved laterally into a role with less visibility, less budget, and less political relevance. All 3 outcomes look organic from the outside. None of them are. Each is the predictable conclusion of a file you never opened. Here's the realization that matters most. You cannot prevent the file from being built. You can only shape what goes inside it. Every email, every meeting summary, every Slack message during this period is either entering their file or yours. There is no neutral space. Picture this. 6 months after the challenge, a layoff round arrives. Your name appears on the list. Leadership says it was based on business need. The business need was the file. The file was the response to the moment you stopped agreeing with the official story. What outcome are we trying to achieve here? You should ask yourself before every difficult conversation. That question alone reframes the dynamic. If you felt this exact pattern in your last role, you're not imagining it. You're describing a system that exists in nearly every US corporate environment. Drop a comment with the word seen if any part of this video matched something you've lived through. It helps others know they're not alone. Subscribe if you want the next breakdown on how calibration meetings actually function and what your name moving down really means. The final thing to remember is this: the file is not an accusation, the file is a forecast. It predicts the version of you the organization will need when they eventually decide you've become inconvenient. You don't fight a forecast by arguing with it. You fight it by changing the data it's built on, or by leaving before the prediction matures. The professionals who survive these systems are not the loudest defenders. They are the quietest documenters. You don't need to win the narrative. You only need to make the file too symmetrical to weaponize. The moment you stopped agreeing was the moment you became visible. Visibility in these systems is not always a reward. Sometimes the smartest career move is to be brilliant, documented, and quietly preparing your next chapter before anyone realizes you've started. The file they built will outlast your tenure. Make sure the one you built outlasts theirs.